Hi guys, Ingrid Marsh here from Soulful and with Ingrid. Everything you need, my darlings, to live a juicy, creative life. Anyway, my lushes. So today I'm going to talk about shaming. Shaming is an important word or an important thing to be aware of, or to be conscious of if you're wanting to live a more creative, juicy life. And shaming happens in lots of areas. In fact, Brené Brown does a lot of work in this area. But one area I want to touch on particularly is shaming when it happens within the realm of race, because it happens there a lot. So let's talk a little bit about shaming. We're all guilty of it to different extremes. Sometimes we do it unconsciously. Sometimes we're doing it to try to keep that person safe, and sometimes we do it maliciously. So what shaming is, and particularly in the realm of race, is that whenever you go to listen to your soul whispers and live a more soulful, juicy life, when that bubbles up inside of you, it may or may not fit in with your stereotype. All right, my lovely. Your soul, what your soul desires, what your soul gets passionate about, knows nothing about your race or your peer group or where you live. Okay, it's just something that gets excited when you see or get involved with a particular thing. Now, what will happen is, if it doesn't fit within your stereotype, what will happen is people within your peer group will then shame you to snap you back in again. All right, to get you back into the mechanical life, back within the rules of that stereotype. So they'll, typical thing might happen to me. If it's not stereotypically black, they'll say, "Oh, you think you're white," and no one wants to hear that. You see, I mean, I'm not bothered. It's like, crack on, say what you want. But if you're new to just opening your bud and you hear that, you'll be horrified, and that in itself will make you snap back into place. Okay, so and it's quite disastrous in that I remember once meeting a brown lady, and she was an auditor. That's her identity. It wasn't her soul. And I'd been at this event, small event, and I'd written an extract from my book that I was in the process of writing. It was some years back. And she said to me, as we were walking home, she said to me, "Oh, you're quite lucky, Ingrid. You have a voice and I don't have a voice." And I hear things like that. Those sort of things just get me worried. There's nothing I have that you don't have. Okay, my lovely? And when I dug deeper and kind of, unpicked what she was talking about, she kind of mentioned within that she loves poetry. She loves writing poetry. So I said to her, send me a piece. I'd love to read a piece. Now, it was interesting. The poem she sent me was very floral, beautiful, flowery, almost like skipping amongst the hay and in the wind with her hair sort of like flowing behind her, that kind of setup. But it wasn't, if you were reading it, you wouldn't have thought, well, this was an auditor or this was an Indian lady. Do you know what I mean? And I kind of picked up from that her peer group, where she, her peer group, her family or what have you, or friends, saw her as an auditor. She lived the life of an auditor, but her soul had a completely different vibe, So it's quite possible that if she talked about poetry in that very floral realm, amongst the wrong people, they'll say like, "Oh, you think you're white," or "You think you're XYZ. That's not very Indian, is it?" type thing, anything along those lines. And that would then snap you back into place. Because we have this thing where, and the brain is programmed that way, that we want to fit in. Now, the reason the brain is programmed that way is because back in caveman days, if you didn't fit in, if you didn't belong to a group, you would starve, you would die. Unfortunately, the brain hasn't caught up with that. Do you know what I mean? The brain hasn't caught up with the fact that nowadays, you're not going to die. You're actually going to live quite fine. Okay, my lovely? But that program is still in your brain. And what it does is it snaps you back in. And I cannot begin to tell you, my lovelies, the names I've been called to snap me back in to the mechanical life. "Oh, Ingrid, you're eccentric. You're the one you think you're white." Get that a lot. What else have I been called? All sorts of names. But I say all that to say, like, I don't care. Do you know what I mean, lovely? Because I know my consciousness is higher than that. So I don't. Oh God, my neck is falling off. I don't allow those things to snap me back into place. But I can see for those who are new to that, open up, just new to flowering kind of thing, that could absolutely throw you. Now, the things to remember, my darling, is that like going back to what I said at the beginning, your soul knows nothing about these rules of this, stereotypes are constructed, they're constructed by man to keep us in our little boxes. Unfortunately, there's, enough cookie cutter, I call them the cookie cutter police out there to get you back in line. Usually because they fear this themselves. Like I said, for some of them, they think they're keeping you safe because they don't want you to step out of line because they're thinking, oh, you're just going to get abused by the people in your group. Sometimes they think they're trying to keep you safe. I remember once with my mum, actually, she said, I was in Jamaica and I wanted to go to Elsha Beach. And I love Elsha Beach. It's a bit broken down and stuff, but it's real, it's like get down and dirty type beach. I love it. And she didn't want me to go because she heard that it was a bit more dangerous there now. But, I'm quite defiant in that I want to go, I want to feel my soul. And then she was like, no decent girl, Ingrid, goes to Elsha Beach. I was like, the mum, I'm not decent. Do you know what I mean? So, and that is in that case, she was trying to keep me safe. But the shaming is done, no decent girl, is done to get you back in line. Do you know what I mean? So, like I said, sometimes it's done unconsciously, sometimes it's done maliciously. Like I've said, I had the one where it's like, oh, you're eccentric. And I was like, eccentric? Oh, what does that mean? Does that mean I have a voice? Does that mean I stand up for what I believe in? Does that mean I live a creative life? I love being eccentric. Are there any other names you like to call me? Do you know what I mean? It's like you silence them that way. Or you just say, okay, and keep it moving. All right, my lovely. But if it's the choice between living a soulful, juicy life and living a mechanical life just to fit in, no, we are a long time dead. I told you recently and in a post not that long ago, I watched my cousin die. Do you know what I mean? We are going to die. There's a wonderful quote by Maya Angelou where she says, many of us go to our grave with our song still inside of us because we wanted to fit in, because we wanted to fit within that box. We've had our arms and legs chopped off to fit within that box. My lovely, that's just not an option. It's not a choice. This is one life that you have. We have to make it a juicy one. And you just do it little by little. Do you know what I mean, my darling? Step by step, little by little. Another example might be like, suppose you're living in a council estate, but you love classical music. Your soul comes alive when it hears classical music. You can't silence that. You can't stop that. You can try and dumb it down a bit because you're like, well, if I come out with this, people are not going to accept me. They're not going to accept me. I'm going to lose my support structure. I won't have that family. That song is not going to go away. And then sometimes what people have done in that environment, they've mixed the two worlds and created mashups. Do you know what I mean? And actually created something quite beautiful. So don't squash that. Don't squash that song inside of you, my lovely, because it's through that something magical and something really creative can be born. Opposite to that, you might be someone living in one of those massive houses in the suburbs overlooking the park or something like that, living that life. But your soul sings for a completely different life to that. You'd be happy to sell the house and live on a houseboat somewhere or live in a tent, live off the land. But the people around your environment, your family, your parents, they're like, no, well, you can't do that. We look down on people like that. And many people have just gone wild. Many women have just gone wild, just been like, I'm going. Do you know what I mean, honey? Because the soul was screaming out too much and that needed to be satisfied and that needed to be fulfilled. Me personally, for whatever abuse people want to give me, I'm like, crack on. The soulful life, the juicy life fulfills me far more than fitting in with you. I've got to say when I say that, people stay unhappy because they're worried about what other unhappy people are going to think about them. I don't care. It's not as though I'm doing this and your life is happier than mine. No, it isn't. All right, my darlings. So I say all that, my lovely, to say to look out for shaming. Shaming is what will really splatter, obliterate, kill your creative juices. It would just kill you, kill your spirit. So to be conscious of that, my darling, to elevate yourself above that noise and tune out from it. Do you know what I mean? Slowly but surely tune out for it and find your choir. I'm also going to go back to that. Find your choir. It's much easier to find your choir now than it was in my days. I've been like this since I was born. When I'm in my 50s now. early, living this juicy life amongst traditional people who were desperately trying to, get me to fit in within the box. It was awful. It's much easier now to find your group, to find your choir. Okay, my lovely bit, particularly around the one around race. Like I said, this one comes up a lot. We want to fit in within that group. We don't want to be told that we're not, that you think you're black, you think you're white, you think you're Asian. That's what Chinese people do. That's not what black people do. That's not what white people do. This is utter nonsense. The soul is the soul, my darling. Does that make sense? So if you are ready to live a more widely fulfilling, juicy, creative life, my lovelies, don't forget to join my community on my website, thesoulbabe.com. Ciao.